Open your mind.
Hey out there, this is Buzz with TheSurvivalBuzz. So I would assume most of us out there, before we could even put a name to it, at a very young age, understood the fact that, you know, if we go to the hospital or the doctor or somewhere to get something done medically, that the doctor had to be forthcoming with everything, let us know everything they were going to do, and just be honest, let us know what they were going to do, what procedure they were going to perform before they actually did it. And so that's always been in the back of my mind. I'm sure a lot of you knew that growing up. It's pretty common knowledge. But then hence the pandemic happened a few years back. And there were talks about forcing people to get certain jabs in their arm and jump through certain hoops to keep their job or assistance or whatever they wanted to throw at us. We were all worried about that. We all thought that that could be something that would possibly happen. They could actually try to force us to take something. And at that point, we would be forced to either go along to get along or fight back and say, no, we're not going to do that. And a lot of people preemptively jumped ahead and went ahead and did it just so they could keep their job, or worries that they might lose their job, or to please their spouse or friend or family member. They just went ahead and went along to get along and did it just to save face. And a lot of us said no. Well, I read this article today that's rather disturbing and kind of feeds into a little bit of what I'm talking about here. So I wanted to read a little bit of the article and kind of discuss what I think some of the possibilities could be with something like this actually going through. But anyway, here you go. I'm going to read the headline first. It says, the FDA's new rule allows for medical research without informed consent. Now I'm going to go ahead and read the definition of informed consent. That way we're all on the same page. Like I said, most of us realize this, but maybe we don't know the definition of it. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. Informed consent, a noun. Consent by a person to undergo a medical procedure, participate in a clinical trial, or be counseled by a professional such as a social worker, a lawyer, after receiving all material information regarding risks, benefits, and alternatives. It also goes on to say, consent by a patient to undergo a medical or surgical treatment or to participate in an experiment after the patient understands the risks involved. So they have to actually sit down with you, somebody, and explain what they're going to do. All the risks involved with it, and alternative measures that you could take, or if there is any, and all the, the positive or negative outcomes that could come from this procedure. All right, so now I'm going to go back to this article, read a little bit of that, now that we know what informed consent is. In an effort to encourage the discovery of more treatment and diagnostic options in the medical field, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has finalized a rule allowing certain clinical trials to operate without obtaining informed consent from participants. The study cannot pose more than minimal risk to humans and must include appropriate safeguards to protect the rights, safety, and welfare of those involved. All right, so pretty vague, right? So much of the pushback against the new rule suggested the changes would allow for institutional review boards to compromise on standards, more and more adding that the term minimal risk is too vague and could be misinterpreted or abused. The result would be decreased public trust in research and healthcare providers. Not that we have any of that going on right now, right? All right, so this is minimal risk defined by the FDA now. Minimal risk defined by the FDA means the likelihood of experiencing harm, discomfort is not greater for a subject during a study than for them during everyday tasks. In other words, there's minimal risk in nearly every activity, from walking to putting away dishes to picking up the kids from school. The study's risk cannot exceed the risk of one experiences daily. So your everyday normal life. What risk are you involved in? Sounds pretty simple, right? Like nothing extreme, nothing that could possibly hurt you, right? But it's still very vague. I mean, who's to define that? That is somewhat of a definition, but I mean, there's minimal risk in everything, but there's extreme risk in everything too. I can walk across the street and there's minimal risk that I'm going to die, but there's also a minimal likelihood that a car is going to come flying down the road and plow into me and kill me. So who's to define what these minimal risks are, right? So with all that being said, I feel like this is just somewhat the first steps of a slippery slope of them just pushing that goalpost a little bit further down the road. And who's to say another pandemic doesn't roll around this time, start killing people, hurting people like before. And they want everybody to get tested, and then within that test is the cure for your problem, right? Because there's minimal risk involved. There's more risk if you don't get this thing they want put inside of you. You could possibly die, but there's minimal risk if you just have the shot or whatever it may be, you know. If you take this, you're putting less people at risk. You know, they can play it like that as well. It's not necessarily just the risk to yourself, but what about the risk to others? If there's some fatal thing that's coming through and wiping, you know, large amounts of people out, who's to say they can't come along and just force you to take something that you don't want under the guise of protecting other people? I mean, that's basically the way they pushed it before. You know, they didn't necessarily force you, but they sure made you feel bad. You're killing granny next door if you don't go out and get something jabbed in you. And like I said, this is just a goalpost that's going to get pushed further and further. So they can push their agenda. And, you know, I'd go as far as to say this is a little bit of population control, maybe. And I think the first run of this was just kind of a test to see what would happen, to see how many people would go along. And it went pretty well. It went pretty well. I don't know if it will go so well this time. I think a lot of people realize a lot of it was BS, and they're not ready to go along to get along anymore. We can only hope so. But the FDA passed this. It's been active for 3 days now. And I just see red flags everywhere. I just feel like there's definitely something fishy going on here. And pretty soon we'll figure out what that is. So God bless y'all, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Later.